Good morning, everyone. My name is Wesilin Jingela, and I'll be taking you through the evacuation procedure from this room. So in an event of an emergency, an alarm will sound, which will be followed by an announcement from our PA system. And once we hear that message, please just try not to panic and leave the room as safely as possible and gather our belongings. And if there's any persons who are living with a disability, please let's assist them out of the room. From this room, there are 4 exits that you can use. There's 2 on my left here and 2 on my right. If you're using this side of the room, you go straight down the passage. Through the glass door, you will turn right, down the staircases, and you'll go to the assembly point number 2, which is our pool area. And if you're using the other side of the room, same process, down the staircases to the security checkpoint and to the pool area. And please, let's make sure that we don't split ourselves as a group to make sure that everyone is accounted for. And should the staircases be blocked by any chance, you'll proceed straight as if you go into the retail area. By the retail area, there's a glass door as well. You will turn right to the security checkpoint, and you will meet at assembly point number 1, that is by Nick's Cafe. And once we get to our assembly point, an attendance register will be used to make sure that we account for everyone. Please make sure that you sign it and you use your cell phone number there, not your landline number, in case we need to contact anyone. And should there be a fire in this room, there are fire extinguishers along the passage here. So anyone who is trained in that regard can be able to assist us. And once the building is declared safe, we will be contacted back to come by our safety personnel. And please, let's try and make sure that we clear out the way here for safety purposes. So if you need any tapes, we will be able to assist you to tape out those cords that are on the way there. And if you need the restrooms just outside here, the first one will be for the ladies, and the next one will be for the gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vui. Without further ado, I'd like to call on our new Group Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Andre de Ruyter, to give his opening remarks.
All right, thank you, Dikatsa, and thanks and good morning to everybody for your attendance. We look forward to engaging with you on a regular basis and hopefully to build on the trust relationship that we have with not only the media but also with the people of South Africa who are our customers. It is very clear that Eskom faces unprecedented challenges and crises as it navigates a very difficult environment, not only in terms of a changing energy environment, but also in terms of navigating some of the legacy issues that we are facing in terms of our past, in particular a legacy of poor maintenance, a legacy of corruption and capture. And for us to overcome those issues will take a lot of resolve internally, a lot of hard work internally, but also a lot of support from the South African public. And we look forward to working with you on that. We have a crisis of trust in Eskom. And the crisis of trust is not only related to the lack of trust that we have from our customers, the consumers, industry, mining, but we also have a lack of trust from our shareholder, we have a lack of trust from our lenders, and we have a lack of trust internally within the organization. And it's one of my primary focus areas to restore that trust compact and to overcome that trust deficit. Because I believe that that underpins the very foundation of what we are trying to do at Eskom. Now, in order to navigate that, in order to achieve this rebuilding of our trust relationship with our key stakeholders, we want to address 5 primary objectives. And these are achieving operational stability, improving our income statement, addressing our balance sheet, arguably one of our biggest challenges, addressing corruption, both legacy issues as well as ongoing challenges that we face, and then carrying out organizational restructuring, including the divisionalization program that I have been speaking about before. So let's start with operational stability. It's very important for us to convey to the South African public that we are extremely scrupulous when it comes to the imposition of load shedding. It's not a decision that we take lightly. It is not a decision that we take easily. I am personally involved in every decision to impose load shedding, and it's obviously very regrettable for us to have to do this to South Africa. But we cannot avoid it given the state of the system where we are right now. Our system is constrained, it is unreliable, and it's unpredictable, and it is prone to unplanned outages and breakdowns. We have a threshold for the UCLF, the unplanned outages, of around about 9,500. And those of you who follow us closely will know that that number has hovered over the past month between 10,000 and 13,500, in that range. Now that's too high, and it causes us to have to burn diesel on our open cycle gas turbines, which of course is a very expensive way of generating electricity. At this time, it's also opportune to refer to the fact that we had to implement stage 6 load shedding on the 9th of December 2019. First time in Eskom's 96-year history that we have had to go to stage 6. And this is clearly a highly regrettable incident, but in a certain way demonstrates the depth of the crisis that we find ourselves in. And it creates the burning platform, if ever we needed one, for us to turn the organization around and make sure that we implement the necessary steps that are required to improve our operational performance. We have achieved some successes over the past with our 9-point plan. I think we have lots of good plans. What we now need is execution. And we have developed a comprehensive maintenance plan, which we took to our board earlier this week. The board supported it. And this will enable us to perform the necessary rigorous maintenance on our power plants. And this entails, amongst others, that we will revert to the original so-called philosophy maintenance. And Jan will explain in his presentation more about that, but essentially what it entails is that instead of deferring maintenance, scheduled maintenance, instead of postponing general overhauls and midlife overhauls, we intend to return to the cycle of maintaining our plant as per the original equipment manufacturer's guidelines. Now, this is not unusual, it's not a huge insight, but I think in the past we neglected to perform scheduled maintenance as required, and those legacies are clearly now coming home and causing us to have unreliable equipment. Now, this will result in the fact that, or this will cause us to have an increased probability of load shedding over the medium term as we fix the system. And this is going to be something that's very carefully planned. We are going to develop a fully fledged plan. Part of that plan is also to make sure that we're able to buy in electricity from those entities that have excess electricity that they can make available to us. We will also increase our demand management efforts, and in particular, you'll see in the month of February already, if we get all of our systems right, that we will have a return of the so-called traffic light system on your TV screen in order to enlist the assistance of the South African public in managing demand. I think that there are a number of opportunities for us in South Africa generally, and it's not only households, it's also industry and mining, to be more efficient in how we use electricity. And to a certain extent, we have to wean ourselves off cheap electricity as we progress to a more sustainable Eskom going forward. So we will change our maintenance philosophy, enter into long-term partnerships with the original equipment manufacturers so that we can be sure that we have the appropriate skill and the appropriate commitment from those suppliers to improve the performance of our assets. And part of this effort is going to be an endeavor to address skills transfer, that we make sure that we don't remain dependent on these contractors, but that we build up our own skills base even as we perform our maintenance, and this with a particular focus on the operating and engineering disciplines. So we will unfortunately have to expect some increase in load shedding. We are going to have to do this in a structured, careful, managed way. We will have to be able to give ourselves the space to fix what needs to be fixed. If we don't implement this maintenance plan, there is a very real risk that the deterioration in our system performance will continue, and we therefore need an intervention, and we need it as soon as possible. If I can move on to the income statement, our income statement still remains under considerable pressure, and one of the key elements that we need to address is effective revenue management. Municipal debt, as well as the debt of individual users, remains an area of concern and continues to rise. At the end of December 2019, arrear debt by municipalities was at 26.8 billion rand, including interest, with debt from individual users sitting at a level of some 16.5 billion. I'm encouraged by the strategy that our distribution division has implemented since May of last year to enhance revenue collection. And since the implementation of the strategy, the payment rate in Soweto, for example, has improved from 12% to 23.9%. Partly also due to the fact that we have had political leaders very publicly stating that there is a need for South African citizens to pay for the services that they receive, and that there can be no free ride when it comes to service delivery. We will continue discussions with government through various formal structures. There is an inter-ministerial task team set up to address the issue of municipal debt, and we will endeavor to find a lasting solution to the problem. But it is important that as a country we have to assert the principle that those who use electricity have to pay for it. Moving on to the balance sheet, there's clearly an urgent need for us to look at our balance sheet and also at our debt maturity profile. We have a very significant interest charge on our income statement, and we expect that this could increase, this interest charge, as we refinance, particularly if we are faced with a ratings downgrade. I've had various engagements with the shareholder. I've also had engagements with National Treasury, and I have found both very supportive and engaging in our endeavors to restructure the balance sheet. But it is clear that we cannot expect continued injections of equity until and unless we demonstrate that we will use the funds made available to us wisely. And there's therefore a great emphasis on cost discipline, managing our capital expenditure wisely, and making sure that where we spend South Africa's money, that we do so responsibly. And that message has gone out very clearly to the entire management team at Eskom, and we are trying to live up to that commitment, but more work needs to be done in that regard. So while we're grateful for the support that we have received from National Treasury, the amount of 250 billion rand that has been made available over a 10-year period. We understand that we cannot rely on continued bailouts as the way forward. We have to fix Eskom operationally as well as financially and run it like a business if we want to demonstrate that we have earned the trust of both our shareholder and our lenders. So we're looking at optimizing various costs, operating costs in particular. We spend an enormous amount on procuring goods and services, including primary energy, coal and fuel oil, and we believe that that's one of the main levers that we should look at in order to optimize our income statement and hence also our balance sheet. Part of the solution, obviously, is that we have to have appropriate cost-reflective tariffs, and you will be aware of the fact that we are currently engaged in a number of court cases with our regulator. This is not, we would like to be, we don't want to be engaged in disputes in front of a judge with our regulator, and I look forward to engaging with NERSA in order to get on a more sustainable footing when it comes to the determination of tariffs. But it's also fair to say that we can only rely on cost-reflective tariffs if our costs are reasonable and managed properly. You can't have it both ways, and therefore a strong emphasis on managing our costs more responsibly. The implications of the new build program on our balance sheet are quite clear. It has burdened us with a very high debt level, and we need to complete those new builds as quickly as possible in order to reap the benefits of those investments. And over time, as we reduce our capex spend, as we increase our operational performance, as we manage our cost base, we think that our balance sheet should improve over time, also having regard to the fact that we have the support from National Treasury. When we move on to dealing with corruption, we are very aware of the fact that any traces of corruption still remaining within Eskom will hinder our efforts to turn around the organization and also impact negatively on our finances. We are therefore accelerating our efforts to step up lifestyle audits and forensic investigations, and we will roll that out to certain areas where we believe we are at risk from potential malfeasance. And once we have concluded this, and it's important that we conclude it as quickly as possible because we do not want to forever be in a state of investigation. We want to move on with our primary business of generating, transmitting, and distributing electricity without being hampered by the legacy of corruption and capture. We continue to work with law enforcement agencies. We continue to work with the SIU, the NPA, as well as with the Hawks, and we receive their full support in bringing those that are guilty of malfeasance to book. And I'm very encouraged by some of the efforts that we've seen. You will have noticed at the end of last year, 2 former Eskom executives were arrested, and we are continuing with those efforts to bring people who are guilty of criminal offences to book, bearing in mind that we cannot tar everybody with the same brush. We have to respect the rule of law, and also bearing in mind that Eskom itself does not have powers of arrest. We are, however, at the same time as working with the law enforcement authorities, we are pursuing civil claims to recover monies from entities and individuals who have benefited from contracts entered into unlawfully with Eskom in the past. So the message is clear. There is no room for corruption at Eskom, and we will continue to drive our values as a lever to build a foundation on which we can run an ethical organization. There is a great need for us to enable the turnaround of Eskom by restructuring our company. In his State of the Nation address on the 7th of February last year, the President said that to bring credibility to the turnaround and to position South Africa's power sector for the future, we shall immediately embark on a process of establishing 3 separate entities: generation, transmission and distribution under Eskom Holdings. And he continued to say that this will ensure that we isolate cost and give responsibility to each appropriate entity. Now, we are, as Eskom, 100% aligned with what the President said, and we intend to give full effect to the commitments that he made almost a year ago. We will do this with due speed, and in fact, we went to the board during this week and we presented a strategy that will allow us to divisionalize Eskom, to give effect to what the President said. We are in the process of appointing boards for each of these entities. We should be able to finalize these appointments hopefully during the course of next week. There are certain governance processes that we obviously have to observe, but once that is done, we can start with running those 3 divisions like businesses with full accountability, bottom line accountability, and also operational accountability, which will put me and the rest of the members of my management team in a far better position to get our arms around this business and make sure that there's proper accountability throughout the organization. Now, we need to be careful in how we implement this. There are a number of risks that could potentially manifest themselves. There are tax risks. There are covenants with our lenders that we need to manage. So rather than hitting the brakes, as some enthusiastic copy editors reported, we are hitting the accelerator. But we are doing so in a structured, deliberate manner to ensure that we manage the risk appropriately by building divisions, which over time can then lead to legal separation as envisioned in the roadmap published by the Department of Public Enterprises. I think this restructuring, this divisionalization will enable us to run Eskom in a transparent, effective and efficient way, and it will set us up for success. I believe it's a critical step for us to embark on this strategy. And it's interesting to point out that when Eskom was awarded the Global Utility of the Year in 2002, this is exactly the way in which Eskom was run. So this is not a new concept. It is a proven recipe. It is something that we've done before, and it had fantastic results for the organization. Now that I've spoken about our priorities, I think it's very important to stress that no individual or stakeholder, whether it be management, whether it be the shareholder, whether it be South African citizens or industry, can single-handedly address Eskom's challenges. We will continue to require a partnership approach, and I'm very pleased that we are able to work with government as well as with our board and a very important stakeholder with whom I've had early engagements are organized labor, the unions. And we have already, I think, established a foundation upon which we can work together in a collaborative and constructive way in order to work with our partners in organized labor to make sure that they can contribute to the turnaround of Eskom. I would also like to express my appreciation for the resilience and commitment to powering South Africa that is displayed by so many Eskom employees. The people in this organization work incredibly hard, very long hours, and I think it gives me a lot of confidence and optimism when I look at the people, assets that we have, that we've got the foundation of a culture that is really committed to doing what is necessary to drive this organization forward. So I'd like to thank all South Africans and all of our customers for being patient with us and for heeding the call to be careful with how they use electricity. We apologize and we regret, obviously, the inconvenience that is caused by load shedding. But we need to fix Eskom, we need to fix it properly, we need to position it for success going forward, and that is the road on which we have embarked. I have to stress that if I had thought the job was impossible, I wouldn't be standing in front of you today. So this can be done, but it will require a contribution and the support of all stakeholders. This is not a job for Eskom alone. It requires all of our partners to play a role in improving Eskom. There's a quote that is attributed to Ben Oakley. It's engraved on one of the marble columns in London, and I came across it and I thought it's very appropriate for Eskom, and it goes, our future is greater than our past. And I believe that once Eskom is fixed, our future will indeed be greater than our past. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attendance this morning, and I would like to hand over to Jan to take us through the status of the power system. Thank you very much.
Better this way. Good morning. The purpose of the update is to give an overview of how we performed the last quarter, then to look at some of the things that the Chief Exec has spoken about, philosophy, maintenance, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then to unpack a little bit on the 9-point plan, how we have progressed, and then I'll end by making a few comments. So if we can take it that way. Okay, our power system unfortunately is still very vulnerable and volatile, and we are experiencing still a number of unplanned breakdowns. And since we announced in the beginning of September the summer plan, we unfortunately had 21 days that we had to load shed. And mainly because we exceeded, that threshold that we set ourselves for unplanned, the UCLF's unplanned breakdowns of 12,500 megawatts. Then also, during this period, unfortunately, because the system's been constrained, unpredictable, unreliable, we had to postpone some of the planned maintenance, where we planned specifically during the quiet period over the Christmas season to increase our planned maintenance. Because of the system constraints, we had to cut down, unfortunately, on that. But we are ramping up now, and I'll talk about that in more detail just now. So obviously, our focus is now, from a generation point of view, on how do we fix this unpredictability and unreliability of our system, and that's where the focus will be. But then we also understandably need to inform the public that implementing this philosophy maintenance, and let me stand down, let's stand still here. Philosophy maintenance, what do I mean by that? If you buy a new car, then the manufacturer is saying to you, argument's sake, in 1,000 kilometers, you bring back the vehicle and you drain the oil, argument's sake. And then after a few thousand kilometers, there's something going on in your dash saying to you that it's time for service A. So you've got to bring it in, and certain things need to be done to this vehicle of yours. And then in another few thousand kilometers, another flash on your dashboard saying, now it's time for service B. A little bit more comprehensive. Now this is what we mean by philosophy maintenance. The units, our generation units, let's use it the same analogy as a car. So we need to do the same maintenance, because if you don't do that maintenance, number one, you lose your guarantee, and number two, you take the risk. And because we haven't religiously followed, for various reasons, this philosophy maintenance principle, this is where we find ourselves. So when I talk about philosophy maintenance, what it means is a unit is supposed to be maintained in a certain way at certain time periods. So that is where we're going, and I'll talk a little bit more about that just now. Then obviously we're going to have a lot of focus on the new builds. That's Medupi, Kusile, and I'll talk a little bit about Ingula. To make sure that what we have invested and what we're still investing on those plants, that we do get the value and the return for the country. But then, what is important, I'll end today on a slide just to ask the public of South Africa to please assist in terms of if you don't need to use a kilowatt hour, don't use it. And I'll end on a slide just asking you to look at 6 specific things on how to assist us to bring down the demand of the country while we're entering this period of, while we still have a constrained system that we want to implement now, this philosophy maintenance. And then obviously, the Chief has already spoken, we regret, obviously the inconvenience we cause because of load shedding. If we look what happened the last quarter, just some feedback. On the transmission side of our business, the networks, the big, electrical networks, substations as well as overhead lines, we're finding that we have challenges there as well. And if you look at our system and its lost target of 3.53, we're exceeding it at this point in time with still another 2 months left till the end of the financial year. So we have significant challenges on the transmission network. Although it's performing extremely well, we've set ourselves very stiff targets, but we find we have some challenges. So we have more incidents. And then also what's facing us is it doesn't help, if people believe your transmission tower looks better if you dismantle it and make a bed out of that. So we do find some vandalism and sabotage on our overhead lines, and then we lose lines, it's falling down, and then we have outages. So we do have some challenges, but the transmission team have increased and stepped up in terms of investigations in the high-risk areas. So we're trying as best as we can to deal with the challenges we do have. On the distribution side, very good performance in terms of the network, where we have the frequency rate as well as a duration rate. So the number of times a customer is experiencing an interruption, and then on average, how long is that duration? So the targets we've set ourselves, and again, I need to emphasize it's very stretched targets, we're exceeding those. So we're doing better than what we set ourselves a target. Then in terms of electrification, the target we set ourselves for 157, nearly 158,000 connections for the year end. We're progressing very well, and we believe that we will meet as well as exceed that target that we set ourselves. Obviously, we do have some challenges on the distribution side as well, and that is in terms of non-technical losses, where unfortunately, as the Chief Executive said, unfortunately you have consumers not paying for the product that they're getting. So it's posing some significant challenges for ourselves. And then the Chief has spoken about the challenges in terms of our mini debt, standing nearly moving towards 30 billion. On the new build side, we've appointed a project manager at Kusile. I'm sure I don't have to talk about that. I've seen a lot of publicity on that, but we're very thrilled that we've appointed a project manager for Kusile. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done at Kusile. So we're really looking forward to him and his team's value and contribution. Then a significant achievement on our side, we had some challenges on the Ngula pump storage scheme. There was a time in the middle of last year where we had, of the 4 units, which is rated at 333 megawatts per unit, that we could only get 245 megawatts. And now successfully in December, our engineer signed off that we can achieve now the maximum capacity from each and every one of these units. And for those of you a little bit more technically inclined, that means we can run 2 of these units on 1 penstock successfully. At Kusile, the 2 non-commercial units, unit number 2 and 3, is contributing positively to the network, as well as for that matter, Medupi 1. These are 3 non-commercial units assisting us, and I'll be lying if I don't mention it, assisting us in terms of the available capacity as we speak. So Medupi 1 we had to take off last night because of some ash challenges, but in general the 3 units are contributing very positively. And I'll talk a little bit more about the design defects. What we haven't put down here, and I'd like to make mention of that, we have a power station called Kuberg. Now, Kuberg is performing extremely well. It is safe. I met yesterday with the Nuclear Safety Board, independent external body, and the feedback was, well done, Eskom, in terms of safety. We have no concerns. You have a very committed workforce and put safety, ahead of everything else. As we speak, both units are running close to 920 megawatts. So we just successfully brought back unit number 1 towards the middle of the month. So both units are running extremely well at Koeberg. Let's look at generation, where we have some significant challenges. In terms of the availability, this is our energy available that we have available to meet the demand of the country. We see a negative trend. So because of the unpredictability and unreliability, it is going one way, and it's unfortunately not the way we want it to go. So it is getting more and more challenging. And that's the reason why we went to the board to request support. And I'll talk a little bit on the slide just now on the support that we require to implement the maintenance that we need on these units. So at this point in time, we're standing on a year-to-date of 68%, where our target for the year end is 71%. So it is clear that we're not going to get there. In terms of trips, there we have 471 trips year-to-date, where we set ourselves a target, which obviously is not acceptable, by 420, so we've exceeded negatively these number of trips. And currently, the forecast to year end is 620 trips. So it is a significant challenge that we have. So the units are unreliable, unpredictable, and when you don't expect it to fall over, so to speak, to break down, it actually happens. Then in terms of our partial load losses, for those of you that's not fully aware, if you take a vehicle and you put your foot on the accelerator, and you can actually get 160 kilometers out of it, but if you put your foot on the accelerator and only get 100 out of it, so you can't get that additional 60 kilometers per hour out of it. That means there's some losses, some partial load losses. So here we set ourselves a target on the fleet of 3,500 megawatts, but unfortunately we're exceeding that target of nearly 4,200 megawatts. Positively, our maintenance, planned maintenance, is moving forward, not where we want it, but you'll see a significant step change moving forward now. And then on the diesel spend, although it's actually a negative that we spend diesel to supply the demand of the country, we set ourselves a target of 7 billion, where we've only invested and burned 2.5 billion to date. Now, if I can just remind you, these are very hungry and actually very thirsty machines. So each and every open cycle gas turbine that we have consumes on average close to 14 liters of diesel a second. So it's extremely expensive. This gives you a graphical picture of the year-to-date, the energy availability. If you look at the dark blue, you'll see that it's coming down constantly. And specifically in December, you can see we're under 60% available for December. And as the Chief Exec said earlier, that's the time that we had stage 6 load shedding, regrettably. So you can see that we have a downward trend, and if we don't look and respect, and I think it's an important point. The question is always, why is Koeberg performing so well? I think you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out. In the nuclear environment, if it's time for an outage, you can guess what's happening. There is an outage. If you ask for a certain amount of money to do that outage, you don't have to guess the money is available. So I believe it's time. The time has come, and we've realized and accepted that we need to pay the same respect to our coal-fired power plant that we do to our nuclear plant. This is just a bit of a breakdown in terms of that partial load losses. You know, that 60 kilometers that is not available. And it's basically 4 power stations, Tetuka, Kendal, Medupi, and Arnott, which makes up about half of the partial load losses. So there's a dedicated focus teams that has been assigned to these power stations. And maybe I also need just to mention that as of tomorrow, All the group technology resources are relinked back into the line businesses, so we don't have a big pool, central pool of group technology resources anymore. So they link to the divisions, the various divisions. And as of the end of March, wherever we need these resources, that's where they will be deployed to. So we believe that it's best suited to have your technology resources where they are needed on a daily basis, and that is on site. So let's talk a bit about the philosophy maintenance, this vehicle that you need to respect and look after. Now, we went to the board on Wednesday, and we presented quite a comprehensive plan to the board on how we would like to care and respect for our coal-fired power plant. And I'm very pleased and thrilled to say that the board has given their full support that we implement this philosophy maintenance. Now, so we will start soon, but you know, this can't happen overnight. So we need to plan this properly, because it's no use you jump into this and you make a boo-boo of it. So we've got to plan this properly, and we foresee that in all earnest, we will, in the next 3 months, be ready to really kick off with this philosophy maintenance. But I'll talk a little bit about that just now. So it's to ensure that we have a predictable and a reliable plant, that we implement this philosophy maintenance. So what support did we ask and what did we get? So we ask that we need procurement agility. Currently, we do have some rules, regulations in terms of PFMA, in terms of National Treasury, and it's not to say that that is not needed and necessary and that we're just going to throw it away. We want to see how we can get the procurement engine and supply more agile. That you don't wait so long, because you know, if we kick off this philosophy maintenance program, you cannot stop and say, okay, now we've got problems, we need to get spares. Now we've got to stop and we need to do X, Y, and Z. So it's to make sure that when we kick off, that we can really continue, and that is continuity in terms of this program. So we need agile procurement. We will also now, and we've approached already a number of the OEMs, you know, to enter into long-term partnerships with them. Who knows better than who designed that piece of equipment, and you know, who knows how to operate and maintain that. So for some reason, and I'm not going to go into the reasons, we moved away from utilizing OEMs to assist us in running our plants. So we will be moving back that way, and then we will go into long-term relationships, and it's more a partnership than a commercial agreement. And there will be pain and gain, so that's the intention. And then also, you know, you can assist, or the OEMs can assist in keeping spares. Their reputation is on the line. So I believe this is an issue of a partnership and see how we can work together. Because over time we have lost experience. And so we will then also deal, if the question comes, you know, okay, now what about localization? What about, you know, the SDNL? Obviously we will, when we enter into agreement with these OEMs, make sure that all of those are catered for in the agreement that we have with them, that they will make sure, and we, through them, that we address those objectives that we have. We are currently looking at the 3 stations in Rienaar, Camden, and Grootvlei. Currently, we have a date that we need to take them down, or so to say, to sleep, to look if by some investment, and obviously you need to look at your cent per kilowatt hour running that station. Can we prolong, you know, the set and the put down date if we can get more capacity out of them? So it's an area that we will look at. Then, for those of you not aware, we have some vacuum problems at Matimba. The station is built in such a way that whenever it's quite a hot day, that we have some losses, so you don't get maximum capacity out of the station, is to see how we can change and modify by means of designs that we can get maximum capacity out of it to adequately deal with the vacuum losses. Then, as I said, we've lost some skills and experience. And we're going to see how we can complement and fill up this, especially in the critical vacancy side of it, that critical side, like plant operators. But I believe that I have, on a previous occasion, said to you that we went to the board in May last year and requested to fill critical vacancies. The board provided us approval to do so, and the generation environment, it was just over 2,000 people to fill critical vacancies, and I can say that we're standing on 80% that we filled those vacancies. However, we've been given a target not to exceed 10% external for various reasons, but now we've been given the go-ahead to responsibly go and have a look where we cannot find and fill these critical vacancies, to go and find them external. Then we have some challenges in terms of coal. In November last year, the year before, sorry, we were running out of coal. And now we do have the volumes, but now we have another challenge, and that's called the quality of coal. So that's a big issue. So we will revisit each and every contract. We will put in place control measures on how are we going to make sure that that coal supply agreement that we've signed for a specific quality of coal, that we make sure that when it's leaving the mine, that it's basically, that's what's arriving at the power station. So there's a lot of work, but there's good support for that. And then the board said, you've got a 9-point plan. We believe you have progressed, but let's get some speed to that. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. So these are the things that we asked the board, will you support us if we go this way? And there's been full support that we will go this way. So what will Becky and his team be focusing on to ensure stability of our plant? Obviously, to improve this defects, the latent defects that we have at Medupi and Kusile. So we've dealt now with Ngula. I'm going to deal with the issue now. So we've spoken at length with the contractor, Mitsubishi, and we as Eskom believe the accountability is with Mitsubishi. We will support as Eskom wherever we can, but there's a design. We went out on a tender. There's been a tender that's been adjudicated, a contract that's been awarded, and that is, and which we pay for, and that is what we want. So, but what we have decided is to have 2 streams running to fix these defects on the boiler side. And I must come up for Mitsubishi. They are fully committed together with Eskom to find the technical solutions. But in parallel, we'll then run the commercial route. So, but the focus is to make sure that those power stations and those units are performing the way it's supposed to, because we need that capacity for the country. So that's just important. Then we will prioritize refurbishment. Becky and his team will prioritize the refurbishment, this philosophy maintenance, that we make sure that we identify and focus on the units that will give us the maximum capacity as soon as possible. It's no use you take Kumati, with respect, nothing against Kumati, or for that matter, Hendrina, and that you put your focus there. We rather put the focus on the big impact units. Just to jump back to the defects, Medupi 3 was taken out on Monday. And we are going to implement the design modifications, so it's out for a time of 75 days. And we trust that when it comes back, that it will be successful. We will get what we want in terms of capacity and reliability and sustainability, and that we can roll that out then to the other 11 units, another 5 at Medupi and 6 at Kusile. We started this week on the philosophy maintenance, this week and last week. Now, this philosophy maintenance I need to qualify. So these are units that's out for a long term, and we're going to do the service A or B or whatever is required on these units. But this will be done not currently with the OEMs. This will be done with the resources that we currently have. So but this is to give you an indication. There's already 3,200 megawatts that we have taken off for plant maintenance on a long-term basis. And that's having a negative impact, obviously, on the available capacity as we speak. And then I've spoken about the management of coal. So let's look at the 9-point plan, and I very briefly would like to give an update on where we stand on the 9 points. So we start number 1. I think I've basically dealt with the issues that I wanted to, that in Gula we've resolved the issues, that we are looking now actively at the challenges, design the latent defects that we have at Medupi and Kusile on the boiler site, together with MHPS. The issue of fixing of unit trips, so there's been positive movement on the fixed new plant. And we trust that after 75 days, we can come back and say we are now moving forward and we've dealt with the defects. Fixing unit trips, I believe you're aware, having said to you earlier that we're standing on 473 trips to date and we forecast 620, that it's an area that needs significant challenge. But we believe that by implementing our philosophy of maintenance, we will deal with it adequately. And the generation team understands fully. We will give them the latitude and the time and the money and the resources now to implement this philosophy of maintenance. But we've got to make sure when a unit comes back, it stays back. It stays on. It's no use. We bring it back. We spend all the time. It was not available. And we don't get that reliability and sustainability out of it. Then, in terms of fixed units on long-term outages, although the robot looks more green than red, I've insisted that we leave the 2 units, Letabu 5 as red, as well as Duva Unit 1, because we've slipped. Both these units were supposed to be online already. But we believe, and the teams are now committed, that we will have these 2 units, which is significant. It's nearly 1,000 megawatts. We will have them back by February. So in this month coming, both those units will be back online. So good progress. However, the negative one, or the negative point being we've slipped on those. It should have been back. Partial load losses, we believe that will be dealt with adequately as well when we implement our philosophy of maintenance, that we can get that additional 60 kilometers out of the car when we put our foot on the accelerator. Outage duration and slips, I see my colleague from Rotec, Philip Dukashi, is here, the acting chief executive. I must admit that there has been positive progress and performance in terms of the outages, where the slippage was not acceptable in the past. We have made a significant improvement. We're not where we want to be, not close, but there has been good performance. And I'd like to congratulate the teams on that as well. Then human capital, you see Becky there. So Becky is fully in the saddle. All the power station managers have now been appointed. We have appointed 3 cluster managers. So you have a cluster manager accountable for a few power stations. So assisting Becky to stand back and to manage the generation division. Now the focus is on the next layer of management, is the leadership in the power stations. So we've made some progress, and I've given some feedback that on the critical vacancies we've moved 80%. So, but we still need to do quite a lot. I'm also pleased to say that part of that 2,000 appointments at critical vacancies, 205 of those been appointing learner plant operators, now been plant operators. So we've got a pipeline moving forward. But you can understand if the board said 10% is external, of the 2,000 you've appointed 205 learner plant operators, your 10% external is over. So this is why we went back and say, can we please appoint additionally outside. Then in terms of diesel, the 5-year contract has been placed. We in daily contact, believe me, in daily contact with our suppliers, and I believe there's a very good relationship now. When we push on their button, they really perform. So I believe specifically Petro SA has come to the table, but the other suppliers are also on board. Then reduce emissions. You will remember that during the course of around about the middle of the year, we moved away from the item that used to be, item number 8 used to be prepare for rain. And because of the challenges that we have in the emission side, we've decided to replace that one, item number 8, with the emissions. So obviously we have some significant challenges. We really have some challenges that we don't adhere to what we need to, but we have plans in place. As we speak, we've got Kendall that is a huge challenge to us. As we speak, Kendall 5 is up for the next, I would guess, 5 months or so to fix, obviously, philosophy maintenance, but also to fix the emissions challenges that we have. And tonight, Kendall 1 will go off. So we are dealing with the issue of, the emissions that we do not, those standards and regulations that we don't adhere to. So there has been positive movement, and we're obviously in very close contact, and there's very good collaboration between us and DEF. Lastly, on item 9, which is our coal, 22 days, 13 months ago, we're now just under 50 days, so we're on 48 days. So in terms of volume, we have sufficient volume. We only have one power station, which is Arnott, which is below the grid code of 20 days coal, but it's standing on 19.7%, and by the end, 7 days, and by the end of Feb, we will have recovered in excess of 20 days, adhering to the grid code. But what remains a challenge is the issue of quality. Because if you get poor quality, it has an impact on so many things in your power station. You've seen all the boiler tube leaks. We've got ash handling problems, so it's an issue that will receive, and is currently receiving, but not sufficiently yet, receive a lot of attention moving forward to make sure that what we pay for, and whatever that contract is, that there is adherence to that. Rain, we had excessive rains in December, and I can stand here with a lot of confidence and say, if we haven't prepared for rain during the course of last year, the disaster on the 9th of December would have been greater. So I'd like to congratulate my team by putting in place and prepare well for rain. However, it still always remains a risk, but we have hands on deck to deal with this issue. Then in conclusion, we are, as Eskom, we're committed, absolutely committed, to ensure the mandate that we have to the country, sustainable electricity supply to grow the economy of our country. And I can give you the assurance that as leadership and the people in Eskom, we're totally committed to make sure that we do exactly that, to ensure that in time that we have predictable and reliable generation plant. But I want to jump then to the last bullet as well. It doesn't help that you stop the generation. The value chain includes the wire side of the business, transmission and distribution. So it's no use, while it's performing relatively well, that you don't ensure that the sustainability continues. So there's a lot of focus on the transmission and distribution side of the business. And just for interest, we went to the board with a generation plan on Wednesday. On the 26th, when the next board of February, when the next board meeting is, we will present the cases, the strategy, not recovery, but sustainable plans for the wire side of the business, for distribution as well as transmission. We also then commit ourselves to keep the public of South Africa informed, should load shedding be required. I know we haven't done it that well, and I do apologize for that. It's regrettably so. But we commit that we will inform the public of South Africa wherever we can, upfront, when we foresee that load shedding is required to ensure the integrity of the system. But then we appeal to the customers of South Africa, whoever uses electricity, our product, and let me jump to the next slide, to use it sparingly. Any resource, you've got to use it sparingly. So I've got 6 items here that I just very briefly want to table. And I'm asking everybody, to assist. because you're not assisting only Eskom, you're assisting the country. When this is always at the back of your mind when you use electricity. Number one being, when you want to use water, use the cold water tap. Because as soon as you use hot water, there's a geyser and an element that needs to be turned on by electricity. Remember when I've got problems in my house. Whenever you leave a room, please put off the light. And your swimming pool, try and set it for 2 cycles during the day, and please try not to have it during the peak times. Early in the morning, say between 6 and 9, and then in the afternoon or late evening or early evening between 6 and 9. So try and use it the other times. Then air conditioners, specifically in summer, to set it to 23 degrees and not 18 degrees. And then if you still have these incandescent lights, that's consuming quite a lot of power. You know, if you have a little bit of light, it uses 60 watts. So go over to the same amount of illuminators and buy a CFL or whatever LED, where it is 11 watts but giving you the same lux. And then also for those of us in offices, please turn off your computers. Don't leave it on sleep because it still uses electricity. That brings me to the end of my presentation, so thank you for your time. And we're looking forward to have a chat to you again in time to come and to give you then an update and of where we stand in terms of our philosophy maintenance. So thank you. Thanks, Dikatsu.
Thank you, Jan and Andre. We'll move to questions now. And let me just introduce our panel there. Next to Jan is Bernard Makoro, the system operator. And next to him is Begin Malo, our generation group executive. And Jacob Machinjike, who is the GM for grids, transmission grids. Please, when you ask your questions or before you ask your questions, just introduce yourself, where you're from. Okay, we'll take 4 hands at a time. Antoinette, we'll start with you.
Antoinette Slabbert from Rapport. Is it on? Okay. Antoinette Slabbert from Rapport. I would just like to check with regards to the overhauls that you are planning to do. Eskom a while ago told me there's no money for those big overhauls. So where is that money going to come from? And then just for clarity, the Soweto, improvement in the payments in Soweto, which period are we talking about? When was it 13% and when did it improve to 23%? And then if you could just please give us detail about this proactive load shedding. And again, where is the money going to come from if you contract with intensive users? Are you only targeting intensive users or also residential users? And what volume do you hope to save by doing that?
There's Bongo over there. Okay.
Hi, Emma Remney from Reuters. Mr. De Ruyter, you've been charged with sorting out Eskom's debt problem and have already mentioned refinancing. Where are you in terms of the negotiations on that, and when do you expect you could conclude them? Also, is that the only option you're looking at, and if not, what other solutions are there? Thanks.
Bongat Kulane from EWN. CEO, you said when I came in that load shedding would happen for the medium term. What does that mean in layman's terms? Yes, it's jargon, but can we have in layman terms what essentially that means? And number 2, you said that you don't want bailouts to be the business of Eskom. You want to move away from that. Have you identified ways to do that, or is that still coming? And thirdly, this maintenance plan, as I think my colleagues are turning to it, it sounds like it's extensive, and it sounds like you need to do it because you said load shedding will continue if it doesn't happen. So financially, also, how will that set you back, and where will you find that money? Thank you.
There was a hand there at the back.
Thank you. Khalid Kuchalia, Shadow Minister for Public Enterprises. I'd like to understand that there's a large focus on maintenance here. And in the past, this is not new, in the past in 2015, for example, Eskom and the government announced what they called a maintenance festival. It came to naught because of mismanagement, because of political interference, and because of graft. What assurances and what plans are in place to ensure that this is going to be qualitatively different? Now, allied to that, ROTAC, who is central to this maintenance, and whose mandate is essentially maintenance and construction, has recently issued a tender which announces a foray into the nuclear pebble bed modular reactor. How does this fit into it, and does this not take away from the focus of it, and how do you cost this? On the question of corruption, can we have full disclosure of contracts? Because without that, we cannot monitor this. And on the question of the application for cost-reflective tariffs, this is accepting a stiff toll on consumers. And what redress measures internally will you take to sweeten the bitter pill for consumers who are tired of paying for mismanagement, inefficiencies, and graft? Thank you.
We'll take that round, but we'll come back to you. Over to you, Andre.
Right, let me deal with the questions. Thanks for those. When it comes to overalls and where will the money come from, first of all, not doing maintenance is far more expensive than doing maintenance. Every time that we load shed, we lose revenue. So this is not a viable solution for us to enable us to turn the business around. If we want to sell electricity, we need to generate electricity. It's as simple as that. So in order for us to have a viable and sustainable business, we need to generate the electricity that we can sell, and therefore there's a very strong business case for us to improve our maintenance practices. We will find the money from internal savings, so we do not intend to approach government for additional funding to support this. We are going to reprioritize, reallocate, and we are going to save. So we've already started with that program, and I think my colleagues can attest to the fact that we are now really looking at rands and cents rather than billions of rands. It's a bit of a change in focus. Soweto, we have seen an improvement in payment rates in Soweto, I'd say roughly about the past 3 to 4 months. We've seen a significant improvement in payment rates. We are, of course, as you probably will have seen, stepping up our collection efforts. We realize that this causes inconvenience for those customers who do pay, and we apologize for that, but we do try and ensure that those areas that have a particularly high or a low payment rate, I should rather say, that those areas are individually selected in order to step up payment rates. So there's a thoughtful, structured program on the go to make sure that on the one hand we work with communities to improve payment rates, but on the other hand we cannot simply accept that people don't pay for the services delivered to them. The money for demand side management, again, we will be able, if we do demand side management properly, we will be able to curtail load shedding as much as possible. And every time that we avoid load shedding, we avoid a loss of revenue. So that makes, from a business perspective, a lot of sense for us. Obviously, where we seek to buy in electricity, we need to ensure that the cost of the electricity that we buy does not exceed the cost of our own generation. So there's a balancing act and there's commercial negotiation that needs to take place. In response to the question from Reuters, in order to refinance the debt, I must just stress that we are not signaling here that there's a wholesale restructuring or renegotiating of our current debt profile. We have a certain debt maturity profile, which is not unusual. Certain tranches of debt will mature in the coming years, and as these debt tranches mature, we will again approach the market and seek to refinance those debt tranches. We are engaged in discussions with National Treasury to understand what the levers are that we can pull in terms of the fact that the sovereign underwriting that is already implicit in much of the Eskom debt, that we're able to leverage that to reduce our cost of debt. And we believe that there's an opportunity for us from an Eskom Treasury perspective, not a National Treasury perspective, to rather, frankly, drive a harder bargain with our lenders. And that's the opportunity that we're after, and we're engaging with advisors in that regard already. Moving on to load shedding, bailouts, alternatives to bailouts. We absolutely cannot go back to government cap in hand and say, give us more money while we waste, while we don't spend our money wisely. So the first port of call is to optimize internally, to manage our own resources better internally, and that is the program that we are driving. For example, on capital expenditure, we are challenging rigorously how we spend capital, where we spend capital. Do we actually need to spend this capital? Do we prioritize our capital in accordance with accepted commercial principles of making sure that we invest where we earn the highest return in the shortest period of time? So just some basic ranking principles that are being applied. And then, of course, the cost management side, which is receiving attention as well, particularly on the variable cost side, and then more specifically looking at primary energy and what the opportunities are for us to drive down costs there. In terms of the load shedding schedule, we anticipate that the maintenance program will carry on for a period of about approximately 18 months. But as Jan said, we now need to very carefully populate the schedule, understand what the resources are that we require, both human capital as well as from a contracting perspective. And once that plan is properly populated, we understand what the demand side measures are available that we can use to create additional headroom for us to implement this program. Then we will be able to, with a much better degree of certainty, say exactly what disruption can be expected, and at that stage we will be able to communicate. So at this stage it's premature for us to give a definitive signal on where we're going to go with load shedding, and obviously we want to avoid it as much as possible. And I hope I've addressed your question around the financial implications as well. Thank you. Mr. Kachalia, thank you for your questions. We're very aware of the need for us to prevent corruption, and I can give you the assurance that we are being very careful in how we assess and award contracts. We are really scrutinizing those contracts to ensure that there is no leakage, and we have very rigorous internal governance programs in place, also supervised by the Department of Public Enterprises as well as National Treasury, to ensure that there is nothing untoward going on. Now, I understand that we've got a lot of skepticism in this regard that we need to overcome, but this is part of a key focus area for us to understand how we can optimize our spend and make sure that we get the best value for the Eskom Rand. On the PBMR, I think you are referring to a tender inquiry that was issued yesterday. I think that has caused quite a bit of confusion, and I think the phrasing of the title of that tender was rather unfortunate. It is not intended to solicit interest in the construction of modular nuclear reactors. It is not. Let me make that very clear. It is intended to solicit interest in the potential acquisition of our modular reactor fuel plant. We have spent over the years, as South Africa, a lot of money on developing the PBMR technology, and we are currently in a position where the PBMR project is in care and maintenance. Now that costs us money. We don't particularly want to spend that money, and therefore we've approached the market with a view to understanding who could be interested in taking over this facility and relieving us of this burden. So let me make it very clear, we're not about to build new modular nuclear reactors. That was, I think, a mistake on our part in the phrasing of the title of that inquiry, but it's not the intention at all. Corruption, yes, it is an issue. I hope I have made our position on corruption very clear in my introductory remarks. We won't tolerate it, we won't condone it, but you will also understand that we run a business and that we can't disclose every contract in every detail. Clearly, where there are untoward issues going on, we will uncover those, and we've already demonstrated in working with the SIU, with the Hawks, that we will pursue those people who seek to take advantage of the very large amounts of money that Eskom is spending. On sweetening the bitter pill, I wish I could say let's sweeten the bitter pill, but as you will have heard very clearly, again from our introductory remarks, Eskom is in a financially constrained state. So unfortunately, this is a period that we need to go through as a country in order to fix the assets that we've got in order for Eskom to become a reliable, predictable supplier of affordably and competitively priced electricity. That is the objective. And as part of that objective, we wish to crowd in private capital into the generation sector, and one of the outcomes of the intended divisionalization is to enable that to take place. So we very much welcome the addition of private capacity, generation capacity, to supplement and to also augment what we have as part of our Eskom generation pool. So if I can take the next round, please, Dekatsa.
Yes, we'll start with Paul. We'll work round.
Hi, Paul Burkhart with Bloomberg News. If you could give an update on the CRO. We haven't heard anything. If he's still serving in the role, when you anticipate a report from him, and basically, yeah, anything on that at all? Thank you.
Okay.
Chris?
Good morning, Chris Yelland from EE Business Intelligence. Question also, there seems to be a changing of the goalposts at Eskom since the President State of the Nation address in February last year. I first thought of the CRO seems to be, his position or his role seems to have changed quite radically from restructuring Eskom to restructuring the debt, and at the moment we've seen no restructuring of the debt. We've seen the concept of subsidiary companies for the three generation transmission distribution seem to be morphing towards divisions as opposed to subsidiaries, legal entities. We've seen a slowdown on the pressure, I think, for restructuring, which was a condition of the bailout. And it just doesn't seem to be happening visibly. We saw the announcement of a war room in December. Has the war room actually met yet? Because there's no visible sign of it. So I just want to ask, are we slowing down on the crisis? Do we need more pain to bring the people together on the same page to move forward, to deal with the underlying issues? And when is this real progress going to happen? Thank you.
Thank you. It's Mariam Issa for Mining MX. I have two questions, one for Mr. Oberholzer and one for Mr. De Ruyter. The first question is about diesel and the use of open cycle gas turbines, which I thought were already under a lot of pressure, but you said you're going to use them more. I understand that diesel cost 6 billion rand in the previous financial year. And I heard a figure of 2 billion. I'm not quite sure what time period this applied to. And I wondered if you have an estimate for the current financial year and also the years ahead, because you were talking about 5-year contracts for diesel. My second question is for Mr. De Ruyter, and it's about the IPPs and connecting them to the grid. You mentioned in an interview that this would cost 18 billion rand, and it would be difficult for Eskom to finance this. First of all, I just wondered which IPPs you're talking about, what sort of capacity, and then if you have a plan to how to ask them to help with the finance for that and a timeline for it. And also going forward, purchasing more capacity from private producers. Have you made plans to connect them to the grid as well? Thank you.
Sure, Terence.
Terence, Creamer Engineering News. Just on the creation of headroom, so the load shedding is limited over the next 18 months. You mentioned DSM, buybacks from industrial users, the introduction of private generation capacity, but then you dropped a bit of a bombshell that you want to delay the decommissioning of Andrina, Camden and Grootflei in terms of the schedule, from what I understood, that you want to actually try and get more megawatt hours out of that. Will you require a deviation from the RP for that? Will your NERSA license application have to change? Why are you considering it, given that these are so expensive, so dirty? So if you could give us some understanding as to why that's an option, rather than just accelerating the introduction of RPP capacity. Has the shareholder, second question, been approached with your philosophy maintenance approach or model, and have they endorsed it? And if not, when are they going to be approached for that endorsement? Secondly, on philosophy maintenance, the OEMs have also changed over the last 30 to 35 years massively. They all changed. So who are you going to exactly contract with for some of these? Who are these OEMs that you're going to contract with? What does it mean for the transformation that's happened in that sector? Just if you could unpack that a little bit. It's a major change that has happened in that sector. And also on your in-house pilot project, the 3,200 megawatts pilot of philosophy maintenance, can you just explain how it differs from the way you've approached maintenance up until now? And then finally, your closing of the 2 units at Hendrina, is that sufficient to offset the Green Scorpions raid tomorrow, or are you going to have to do more to meet your pollution commitments there? Thanks.
Okay, Andre, those are your questions.
Right. First of all, the CRO. As it so happens, I met with the CRO yesterday. We had an engagement with him. He presented some of the highlights of his report. He has not as yet, as I understand it, completed his full report. That should be ready for handing over to the relevant ministries by early February. That is the timeline that he communicated to us. It deals with both debt as well as with corporate structuring. So both of those angles are in fact covered. Chris, if that also addresses your question that you had on the CRO. I don't think we're moving the goalposts at all. I think we want to implement government policy in a prudent way which minimizes risk. If you look at the risk associated with a precipitous or a fast move to legal entities, there are a number of key risks that present themselves. First of all, your lenders will justifiably be quite nervous because they want to understand which entities they are lending money to, what assets are on which balance sheets that they can access as security, what guarantees are in place, and to which entities are those guarantees given. So we can't just split up the company and say we are now 3 different legal entities. There are significant risks there. You need to transfer employees. You need to engage with them in terms of Section 197 of the Labour Relations Act. This takes time. You have to develop business models that sufficiently disaggregates all of the different revenue streams to ensure that each of these entities can in fact be profitable and operate as standalone businesses. That is not currently in place. So again, moving immediately to full legal separation will result in greater risk than if we build these prototypes, if I can call them that, the divisions, and over time we can road test the agreements that we need to conclude. We can set up, and this is where Bernard plays a very key role, set up the market operator to ensure that we are capable of buying electricity not only from our own generation assets but also from IPPs on a contract basis, that we have the beginnings of an electricity market in South Africa. So these systems need to be put in place. There are IT systems that need to be put in place. Understandably, if you're a private investor into IPPs, you want to know that your commercial contracts are confidential and that there's not in some way or form compromise between what is happening in transmission and generation in order to somehow advantage or benefit Eskom generation over IPPs, given that all other commercial conditions are equal. So these things need to be put in place, and this will take time. If we rush into legal unbundling, I think there are very considerable risks that will manifest themselves, and I'd rather first of all go through this divisionalization process, ensure that we are able to address these risks, put in place the structures that will enable us to operate independently of each other, and then we can migrate. I can just stress that this is not inconsistent with government policy. It is, this has been canvassed with our shareholder, and there's alignment that the end state has not changed at all. It is the way of arriving at the end state that we want to do properly and prudently. The war room, Jan, to my knowledge, hasn't met.
No, it hasn't met. But what we have done internal is we've established our own PMO, so to speak, that is currently dealing with the issues of demand side and supply side management. But the war room that has been referred to in December, we haven't met yet. So, no, we haven't yet.
Jan, do you also want to deal with the question on diesel, please?
Yep, I will. We understand that that is unsustainable, so we recognize that. So your question in terms of how much we spend, how much we intend spending over the next few years, the intention is to move away from burning diesel. The intention is to move away from open cycle gas turbines to combined cycle gas turbines, because it's so much cheaper. And you can also then get more reliability and additional capacity out of the units by investing and changing the designs. So currently, and then we're also in discussion with Petro SA, specifically at Gaurikwa in Mossel Bay. Together we've established a joint team that is looking at the gas that they are supplying and directly to Gaurikwa then, and not diesel, and to see how we can work together then for us and to convert to combined cycle gas turbines and then to take it from there. So it is important to understand we would like to move away from burning diesel and rather go the LNG or other means of gas. Currently we spent the 2.5 billion and we are under strain at this point in time. The system is under strain, and we foresee that we may be spending significant amounts of money in the next two months towards the end of the financial year. We haven't quantified it yet, So we're in the process quantifying that based on the maintenance program that we have embarked on and that we will move forward in the next 3 months. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, except for the 2.5 billion, what time period is that covered?
Oh, this is since the beginning of the financial year. So that's since the 1st of April. Sorry about that. Since the 1st of April.
Right, if I can address the question on the cost of expanding the transmission grid. The fact that we are migrating over time from a predominantly coal-fueled generation system, and coal will remain a very important part of our generation system for an extended period of time. There's no doubt about that. If you look at the expected life of Medupi and Kusile of about 60 years, it is clear that coal will be around for a long time. However, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow where the coal deposits are found. And we therefore need to extend our transmission network to cater for accommodating these IPPs into the grid. So the number of 18 billion that I quoted refers to approximately 9.8 gigawatts of electricity that we expect will be added over an extended time to our generation capacity. So that's a very big number. And we would have to absorb that cost and recover it through an appropriate transmission tariff that needs to be put in place in order for us to amortize that capital investment that is required. So that's the only signal, but what we are saying is that the narrative that solar power can be bought at 2 American cents per kilowatt hour is not the full story. You need to get it from the Northern Cape to the customer sitting in Johannesburg. And for that to happen, you need to expand your transmission grid. Bernard, if you can add to that.
Yeah. I just want to clarify that this is the cost of strengthening the transmission grid. So it's not the cost of connecting the actual IPPs or the actual generator. So there's still additional cost for distribution connection, which is usually shared between the distributors and the connecting generator.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Bernard. Terence, the private purchases, yes, they're an important part of what we want to do in order to create the headroom, but we also need to look at our existing assets and see what role they can play in giving us that headroom. And obviously, it's a question of numbers and analysis and optimization. Jan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's fine. Thanks.
The shareholder has been approached on the introduction of philosophy maintenance, and in fact we've worked very closely with the ministerial technical task team, which is populated by some very clever individuals, and they have been an integral part of the development of this plan. So there is, I think, very good alignment between ourselves and the Department of Public Enterprises in that regard. Jan, do you maybe want to deal with the transformation elements on OEMs as well as the philosophy maintenance, and then you can maybe also deal with the environmental impacts.
I will do that. Thank you. We had quite a few discussions the last 2 weeks with OEMs, and I don't want to mention specific names, but it's well-known names. And we've asked them a couple of questions, and the one being, you're changing business model, and based on what our specific requirements are, would you be able to support us on a long-term basis in a partnership model? And that was confirmed. That they have access, you see, these OEMs have access throughout the world because they're international companies. If they upfront know the resources that they need, as well as the duration of contracts, they can get access to the skills or to resources that they require. We've also subsequently requested them to provide us with proposals, which they have done, and we're quite comfortable at this point in time and satisfied that what we require in terms of the partnerships, in terms of long-term relationship, that they will be able to supply. We've also asked them the question, very pertinently, in terms of localization and, the skills development. And again, there is no resistance whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, they are fully supportive in terms of that. There was a question in terms of Endrina and Grootevlei. Now, why do you rather want to extend those? As I said, we would like to immediately start a business case to understand, should we extend the life for whatever period? What it will cost, what the investment is, but more specifically, what is the return? And specifically, what will be the cent per kilowatt hour if you have to, say, let it run for another 3-5 years, whatever the case may be. However, having said that, this PMO office that I was referring to, that Andrew Etzinger and Tom Skinner is running, they're also looking at perhaps converting these into gas. So we have these old stations, so it's not only to see if we will run it, as with fossil fuel stations moving forward, but it's also to see, is it not better to convert them into gas? Because the transmission system is already there. So you save quite a lot. So just to mention that as well. In terms of the 3,200, the 6 units that we have out, in the past, because of a constrained capacity, whenever we had the luxury to take down a unit, it was just to deal with the most critical issues over a certain period. Then you will fix it as quickly as you can and bring it back, because that capacity is required, to supply in the demand of the country. These units we're taking out now is we're doing the proper, either service A, service B, whatever that maintenance requirement is for that specific unit. And this is why it's quite extended period, and this is what's making it very difficult for the system operator next to me, because now these units are not coming back quickly, and we consciously made a decision that we will not bring them back before all the philosophy maintenance has not been done. Because it's no use you going to invest in time and resources, and you take a unit out, and these are the intentions to do exactly A, B, and C, and after you've done A, you bring it back, because then you defeat the purpose of what you really want to achieve. And that is to get to a stage that you have a unit that is reliable and predictable, that you can get in this car and it's going to take you from Johannesburg all the way to Cape Town and back. And all you need to do is put some coal or some fuel in it. So that, I hope that's answered that question as well. Thanks, Lawrence. Okay. Oh, yes, sorry, man. Oh, you mentioned Endrina as well. No, it's actually Kendall. Yes, we have received a letter from DEF saying to us, please, if you're not able to keep the emissions below 100 milligrams, then you must please take them off line. We have then responded back to the minister in December requesting some extension, which was granted to ourselves until the end of the month, and I suppose this is what you refer to, what's happening tomorrow. Subsequent to that, we also engaged with DEF, openly and very transparently, that we are doing whatever we can. And as I said earlier, Kendall number 1 is off at this point in time for an extended period to deal amongst, the maintenance with the emissions issue. So that was conveyed to DEF. Then also that tonight we're taking down Unit 1 to deal specifically with the emission side. So that will come back, Becky, in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks' time, which we believe will then be below the 100 milligrams as well. So we have received yesterday a letter from DEF, from the minister, giving us another 2 months extension, while she is considering, our request. So it's up to us now to make sure that we have our plans in place to deal specifically with Kendall, these 2 units, Unit 1 and Unit 5, but then more importantly is to have a holistic view on all the emission challenges that we have on the coal-fired power plants.
Okay, can we just check if we have calls or any questions on the call?
Thank you. If you would like to ask a question, please press star one on your touch-tone phone or on the keypad on your screen. If you decide to withdraw your question, please press star, then 2 to remove yourself from the list.
Okay, let's take some questions on the floor. Debogo?
Dikatsu, can you repeat that question for us? Or was it no question?
No, there was no
Oh.
question.
Thought
Go
only
ahead,
me, they're
Debo.
getting old.
My name is Tebogo Tshwane. I'm a journalist at MoneyWeb. I don't know if perhaps I missed it in the presentation, but do you sort of have a rough estimate as to how much room you're going to need in order to conduct this philosophy maintenance, and how if you take down a unit and you conduct the maintenance that is needed, how long do you think that delayed maintenance that you haven't been doing for years is going to take, and then how long would it then take to bring those units back online?
Okay, we have two back there.
I'm Londiwe Buthelezi from Fin24. My first question also relates to philosophy maintenance, because you've said that it actually has started as of yesterday, but then at the same time you're speaking about still being in discussions with the producers that you can probably buy additional generation from. So I'm thinking you've been in discussion with DPE about this philosophy maintenance for maybe, even if it's not too long, a week or a month, but do you have a single contract in place now with any private producer that will come and fill in the gap that will be left when you take down the units? Or are we still talking about having discussions? Because you're saying you want to minimize the impact. And then my second question is on the cost of those purchases themselves. So you've said that they need to be reasonable, but are you looking at, is the reasonable cost coal generation, or are you looking at diesel generation? Because what is the benchmark here, given that you spend more for diesel? And the last one has to do with the NASA case on tariffs, because you mentioned it briefly, and that you actually don't want to be there in the first place. And you also spoke about the need to be winning us from cheap electricity. And that's one of the points that came up in court, that we're paying too low for electricity in South Africa. Obviously, as consumers, we don't feel like that. We feel that, we are paying way too much for little electricity that usually is not there. So what is your view on that? And because you don't want to be in court, are you planning on having direct engagement with NASA? Thank you.
I just want to check, did you get the initial two questions? Or does Londiwe need to restate them? You covered.
I think we got them, thank you.
Okay, Ted?
I've got two questions, very much related to what the previous questions were, so I wouldn't mind if you combine them. I'm getting a mixed message from Eskom. On the one hand, we're talking about, please, customers, reduce your consumption of electricity. Now, in my language, that means reduce sales for Eskom. On Monday, we're sitting at a NERSA hearing, an RCA claim, which includes 5 billion claim from Eskom for lost sales or sales not made. To me, that's a conflict of statements. And to carry on with the previous question, on the one hand, the minister says, Minister Pravin Gordhan, your shareholder, says that the price of electricity is 4 times higher than what it should be because of corruption and the overruns at Medupi and Kusile. Yeah, in this meeting, we hear that we need to get back to cost-reflective stuff and wean ourselves from cheap electricity. So there's two conflicts that I represent the public. I've got about 800,000 people in my database. And they're asking me to clarify what the message is, please.
Good day, my name is Asha Speckman. I'm with the Sunday Times Business Times. I just want to take a step back. You spoke about the divisions and installing those, and it's clear that there's some deviation from the roadmap. Can you please provide some time frames? Can you provide some time frames on the on the installation of those divisions, setting up the boards, the management, who you're looking at. But then the other question that I have, you addressed the question on the CRO. I have an additional question on that. Previously, Eskom had indicated that it would like the government to assist in the form of perhaps looking at, assuming half of that debt. Does the CRO report deal with that? Does it deal with debt equity swaps, with conversations perhaps involving the PIC and other lenders in that regard? Is that still a position that Eskom has, that the government should assume some of that debt or half of that debt? And as well as the CRO, my understanding is that his term has come to an end. Is Eskom, given that the debt restructuring issues are not necessarily resolved, do you know whether his contract will be renewed? Is that a conversation that you're having with the shareholder in that regard? Do you feel that his contract needs to be renewed? Thank you.
That's the third round, Andre.
Okay. Right. The question from MoneyWeb about how much room do we require and how long will it take? Becky, if you can take that answer, please.
Thank you, Chief. I think in terms of the plan that we put in place now, we know exactly, although we have been per unit, per station, what needed to be done. So that's how it's factored now currently on the plan that we are embarking on. So in that context, we clearly know now each unit is packed based on the scope that need to be done, and that's what we are executing as well.
Okay, thanks, Becky. Then on the question of contracts being in place, we got approval from our board on Wednesday to enter into these contracts. So we can now start the process. We've already spoken to some of the mining sector. We've already spoken to some of the industrial companies that have excess capacity available, but the formal negotiations can now start now that we've got a mandate from our board to engage in that process. On the issue of purchase of electricity, what's the baseline? Obviously, we need to look at what is the electricity that we need to back out. That is going to be a commercial negotiation. And obviously, from where we are sitting as Eskom, we want to drive the hardest possible bargain, as I'm sure the people on the other side of the table have every intention of doing, and that's just the nature of business. Ted, when you talk about, and I'm putting the two questions together about NERSA and cost-reflective tariffs, as you know, the energy regulator is instructed in terms of its enabling legislation to carry out its work in a very well prescribed manner. We believe that in certain instances the regulator has not done that, and where we feel they have not done that and we've exhausted all other avenues, then we intend to challenge that, and that is the reason why we are engaging in legal action at this point in time. And again, it's not a position where we want to be, but it's unfortunately an inevitable position that we find ourselves in. When we talk about the quote attributed to the minister, I must admit that I've got a slightly different recollection to what the minister said. The minister, I think, said that the new build program was significantly more expensive, and I'm not sure if he said 4 times or not, but it was significantly more expensive because of delays, corruption, inefficiency, and so forth. We can see if he attributed that to electricity tariffs per se, but I would be quite amazed if the electricity tariffs were supposed to be 25% of what they currently are. I don't think that's the case at all. So maybe we just need to clarify what the minister actually said and get back on that issue. In terms of time frames for the appointment of boards, now I understand that there's a concern that we will now go out and appoint very expensive management teams to go and operate these divisions. That's not the intention at all. We don't want to duplicate costs. Initially, these boards will be populated by existing management, so we will not appoint new people. We will not go out and appoint external directors at this stage. As we mature and as we put our processes in place, obviously we will migrate, particularly for the transmission side of the business, to enable us to give that independence in the management and governance of the business, to ensure that investors and generation have confidence that their interests will be adequately protected. Time frames, we would like to have those boards appointed as soon as possible. We are aiming to take that to the relevant board committee for approval within this week. So it is not this week, next week. So by the end of next week, we should have those directors appointed and known, and then we can start the process of running the businesses and giving bottom line accountability for each of the individual divisions to the relevant managing directors. I may just stress that this is not an unusual way of running a business. Most major corporations across the world are run in this way. So there's nothing strange or unusual or different in what Eskom is proposing. It's I would say it's best practice in structuring and running a large, complex, integrated business. The CRO report, I think it's best that you address your questions to the CRO. I don't want to preempt what the CRO is going to say, so we can't speak for him. And I'm not aware of any intention to extend his appointment. That obviously is not a decision that we will make. What we are doing is we are going to be putting in place measures to ensure that the execution of the various initiatives that we have embarked on, that is as successful as possible. And for that purposes, we will be putting in place a transformation management office, again staffed from existing resources. As far as possible, we want to avoid expensive external resources where we can, and leverage the skills that we've got internally. So we want to make sure that we set ourselves up for success by having a properly resourced, properly managed structure that will enable us to run these interventions like projects with firm deliverables, firm timelines, and we've already made some progress in securing some of those resources.
I just want to deal with the issue of Rotec ERI. There was a question. ERI is there, first of all, to support Eskom, and specifically the generation environment. So we will take a strategy also to the board next month, on the 26th of February, on how do we see we're going to run Rotec, or ERI, Eskom Rotec Industries, moving forward. But it just makes sense when you have some huge, significant challenges in your business, and this unit, the subsidiary business, is set up to support where you have the challenges. That's where the focus should be. So between the acting chief executive officer and myself...
I just want to give him my earphone here, please. Now, 20 past 12 is the rater. It's the CEO.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. He said it's fine. So now we're not going to do Ted Bloom anymore?
If they want bites, I can do Ted Bloom and bites. What do they want? Is there a men's room at the bottom, or is it on top?
Yeah, there's one at the bottom.
Right here at the bottom.
Yeah. Run out. You still have time.